All righty, that makes a lot better sense. Thank you. Everybody, we can bring it down real quick. Bring it down real quick. Thank you so much. I assume most of you know. If you don't, my name is John Minjo. I'm the executive director of EO Dallas. I introduced myself. Oh, wow. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I introduced myself because today, not only do we have a lot of members here, we have alumni who've joined us, a number of past presidents. How many past presidents of EO Dallas are in the room right now? That is incredible. So thank you so much. And I also know we have friends of Rick personally who've come out. Thank you so much for being here. Rick's going to speak for about 30 minutes. I'll do some Q&A afterward. But before we begin, we're going to show a quick 5-minute video that was taken on December 6th of a speech that Rick gave. He was introduced by a founder of EO, and I think it really sets the stage for what we'll be talking about today, and really get us in kind of that place. So without further ado, I'll let that go, and then Rick will join us right after.
Over the last 2 weeks, I've been fielding a number of calls, texts, emails, asking the same question as it relates to the attendance of the event. Lots of people have been asking, how many people are coming? What's the size? But from a handful of people who have been in the community a long time, they've been asking a different question. They've been asking the question about our first member, the first dollar bill. My mom, Mama Stegan, the original origin story, and then Rick Sapio, the next part of the origin story, because we came into being as a company because of his support, February of 1999. And they know how involved and how much Rick cares about this community, and they also know that he's struggling with a significant challenge right now. And they've been asking, is he going to be at the event? Is he going to be there? And I said, I don't know. So here's quick context. I talked to Rick on a Monday in August 14th this year. And I said, what's going on? And he said, I'm not feeling well. I've been in and out of the urgent care. My skin's a little yellow. They think I might have hepatitis, but my eyes started turning yellow today. And so I don't know. That was on Monday. And then on Tuesday, which I didn't know was happening, his body started shutting down. His liver shut down, and he was rushed to the emergency room. In retrospect, probably within 12 hours of dying. In the emergency room, they performed, miracle of modern medicine, a procedure that put a stent in his body that allowed for his system to get back into a healthy state. And then 2 days later, with no sleep, in an uncomfortable bed, very concerned, very confused, no sleep, they came and gave him the news. You have pancreatic cancer. This is the cancer, the killer of all cancers. This is the cancer Steve Jobs died from. And not only do you have pancreatic cancer, you have the worst form of pancreatic cancer, which is inoperable. And so we are going to start chemo right now. And they came in to port chemo into his body. And he said, wait a second, I want to have more choice. And they said, you don't get a second opinion with this kind of cancer. You are going to die, and we are going to give you chemo so that you can extend your life by a couple of months. Death sentence. And he said, I can't think clearly. I don't want to make this decision. No, Rick, you don't understand. We have something called the standard of care. And when someone with this particular cancer is presented at the hospital, you get chemo. Now, what they didn't know is that Rick had lost 4 immediate family members on the other side of chemo. So he was very cautious about what that would mean to him. And once you start that, as many of you know, you often don't come back from that particular protocol. And so and for those that know Rick Sapio, he refused to be pushed around by the system, and he, against doctor's orders, checked himself out of the hospital, kind of a jailbreak, we should say, and went home and accepted responsibility for his situation, accepted the challenge of taking agency for his health and not subordinating his health to the medical community, and actually playing, as Andy Eby might have said, hashtag offense. And that's where he's been. And not only is Rick here, some of the doctors said he wouldn't last 2 months. Not only is he here in the room, we have called an audible, and we've invited him to come up on stage and give us a little sense of his journey. So please stand in the crucible of our journey with Rick and put your hands together for Rick Sapio.
A healthy person has 1,000 wishes, but a sick person only has one. Robert Berger said that in 1968. Thank you. This was on my wall in my bedroom when I was 16. I have no idea where I got it from, but it says, an entrepreneur is not someone who attempts to predict the future. An entrepreneur is not someone who attempts to predict the future. A true entrepreneur is someone who creates the future for themselves and lives into it. And as I've navigated this very serious health challenge, I've thought about that quote many times. And I could say that to a room of entrepreneurs. I don't know if I could say that to a room of people that aren't entrepreneurs, but the reality is all of us at some level are creating a future to live into. And I think for me personally, I forgot about that, because when they first gave me the news, it was nothing but terror for me and my wife. And I made the mistake of spending time on Google. And one of the things I found on Google was, what is the life expectancy with this diagnosis if you don't do chemotherapy? And the first thing that popped up is 3.5 months maximum. You guys could do that search yourself. Stage 4 inoperable pancreatic cancer. And so you're facing some serious headwinds when you get that. So I would ask you, what would you do if you got that diagnosis? You're living your life. Our kids at the time were 9, 11, 13, and 15 at the prime of their lives, and you get that news. And not only that, but what does your spouse think about that news? They had a roast for me the other night. Calvin Carter initiated it. And one of the roasters of me said, I know what Melissa was thinking because her Match.com profile was recently updated. So you got to find humor in this stuff. What's interesting about the video you just saw, which was exactly 2 months ago, was I gave a story about what I had done since the diagnosis 4 months prior. And what I didn't know was, I don't know if I should sit down. I'm leaning on this because I've got serious stomach pain right now. What I didn't know is what happened after. So from August 18th, when the diagnosis came, my health just kept steadily declining and declining and declining, because what we didn't know at the time. Thank you, sir. Should I sit down? Is that okay? Okay. Was that when they put the stent in my liver, it caused an infection that ultimately went sepsis. So right after that speech was given, I literally collapsed. I was in bed for 2 weeks and went to the emergency room. And what the emergency room thought was that your cancer has gone stage 4, or has progressed beyond what we originally thought of as stage 4. Now your liver is completely covered with cancer, and you could see it on a CT scan. and it's the end. So my wife started preparing hospice and all that. It was over. And then through some miracle, they said, oh, it's not cancer on your liver, it's a sepsis infection, but we can't get to it because it's it's engulfing your liver. And so now I'm sitting in bed, and they gave me this news that they can't get to the infection. So it's good news, bad news, right? Good news is it's not the cancer, it's an infection. Bad news is we can't get to it. And then, again, divine intervention. I met this interventional radiologist who was very confident in his abilities. He said, I think I can get the infection out. But you're going to have to be in the hospital for 3 months getting drip antibiotics, and we're going to have to keep getting this infection out. Long story short, on December 20th, we had this surgical procedure. I don't know if it's called a surgery or a procedure, to get the infection out of my liver. He did a really good job. And I had to wear, some of you may have had this, I had to wear a bag. I decided not to do any slides today. I'm just going to talk from the heart. But the amount of infection that they took out of my liver was mind-blowing. You could see it on the bag. And again, another miracle. I'm going to keep using the word miracle. Instead of being in the hospital for 3 months, they were able to get the infection out, and I was only in the hospital for another 4 nights. So I was home at 6 p.m. on Christmas Eve, which was incredible. And then when I got home, you know, what they're saying is you got stage 4 pancreatic cancer. You don't have a lot of time. Kiss your kids. And somehow the infection went away. And when it went away, there was no cancer on my liver. So what I'm dealing with now is pancreatic cancer that's engulfed the veins and arteries around my pancreas. Still stage 4, official diagnosis, but not on my liver, which is good. So where I sit now with you is I've got time. So I didn't get hit by a bus. I've got time. So then the question is, what do you do with the time you have left? And so what I've decided to do is, I've done it once before, which is share the story of agency, that we all have agency in a crisis. And in addition to agency, we have this opportunity to partner with divinity. I'll use that word, because there's been so much divine intervention. And how does that fit in with entrepreneurship? Well, first of all, in my view, and this is something that we created a long time ago when we created this foundation called A Billion Entrepreneurs. I thought there's probably 1 billion entrepreneurs in the world. Wouldn't it be cool to have an entrepreneur in every home? And it doesn't have to be someone who starts a business. To me, an entrepreneur is anyone who decides to take responsibility for outcomes. When you take responsibility for outcomes, it doesn't matter if you're a stay-at-home mom, it doesn't matter where you sit, but you're taking full and complete responsibility for outcomes. And so how does that play out in your daily life? How does that play out if you get a terminal cancer diagnosis? Well, how it plays out is, for me personally, is I'm going to question everything. So when the doctors say whatever they say, I'm going to question that. And taking total and complete responsibility means you're covering the whole gamut of potential solutions with a diagnosis like this. But I want you to think about it from your life. If I took total and complete responsibility for every outcome, how different would my life be? And we try to teach our kids that as well. So that's my definition of an entrepreneur. I want to take you back to a story that plays out in my life over and over and over. I loved, as a kid, I was born in 1963. I turned 60 in October 26th. And as a kid, my dad would take me to the Hudson River, and we would watch the Twin Towers go up, which was really cool. I think they opened in 1973, if I'm not mistaken. And I loved going to Windows on the World as a kid, just riding up and down the elevators. There was no security then. You could just go hit the button and drive up, go up and down the elevators. And so in 2000, I decided that I wanted to hang out in the Twin Towers a lot. So there was a building conversion. It was the closest one to 9/11, the closest one to the World Trade Center. And I signed the lease there. It was 88 Greenwich Street. And the towers, I forget the address, but they're on Greenwich Street. And so I lived there and signed the lease on 110 Wall Street. And I was going back and forth. So I grew up there, moved to Texas, and then decided to move back to New York. And the interesting thing is when the towers came down on 9/11, it was obviously a horrific thing. It was a massive crisis, massive humanitarian crisis. But I'm telling this story for two things, two reasons. One reason is I was at the job site every day, and it was unbelievable, the outpouring of love. I've never seen anything like it. We had 10 employees in that office. Our office was condemned. Our home was condemned, so I couldn't get back into the apartment where we all lived. This building was a massive building. Couldn't get to the office. And people were just giving anything and everything. I lived in some wealthy guy's apartment on Park Avenue. Money, whatever you need. On the subway, people were hugging and crying. And I remember thinking two things at that point. Number one, why does it take a massive crisis to wake us up? And the second thing I thought was, this must be what heaven is like. It was unbelievable. So I got to experience divinity in a crisis. So that's the first reason I want to tell you that story. The second reason I want to tell you that story is more real, is that supposedly, and I don't know, I was hanging out at the job site every day, and 6,000 people got this exact same form of cancer about 20 years later. So something about people say, and I've done a lot of research on this now, that cancer's from genes going awry, if that's the right word. But if you do the research, it's more the environment. I mean, what we're drinking, what we're eating, what we're breathing, that, in my view, based on what the research I've done, is far more important. Which takes me to the next thing, which is the terrain theory of medicine. The terrain theory of medicine says, and this was predominant in human history prior to the allopathic view on medicine, which is a pill for every ill and training doctors to go after symptoms. But the terrain theory of medicine is, if you change the terrain, you change the disease. So that I buy into far more. So I was 222 pounds when I got diagnosed. Right now, as I talk to you, I'm 167 pounds. Everything about this body, not everything, a lot of things about this body are radically different than they were on August 10th. So my body fat is 9% right now. I've been working out every day. I've been watching what goes into my body. I don't believe that the cancer knows who the hell the person that they attacked is, which is why I'm sitting up here and I look pretty good, I think, up until about 2 weeks ago. So something happened 2 weeks ago, and I don't know what it is. I think as a result of the infection leaving my body, that now I'm just dealing with one thing to deal with as opposed to two main things. So I'm just dealing with the cancer as opposed to the cancer and a systematic sepsis infection, which, by the way, not a lot of people survive that. I don't know if you know, but the number one cause of death for organ type of cancers is sepsis, from what I've been told. I don't know. Is it Scott Conrad's in the room? Is that true? Yes or no? Where is he? I can't see through the glass. Yes. Is that true? We can't hear you, but anyway, let's see what the doctor says. Is sepsis a reason people die?
Yeah, but the end stage. So whether it's cancer or it's another set.
Right. And so they just assume, so what he said was sepsis is what kicks people over the edge that have late stage cancer. So what all the doctors assumed is, well, this is just another one that's going to go to the wayside. So I remember it was about 2 o'clock in the morning on December 18th. And I said, I guess this is the end. God, if you want me, take me. But if you don't want me, as I said in the video, which I'll explain in a moment, tell me what you want to do with my life. Well, unfortunately, he didn't answer the second part, but he said, what I heard really clearly in my delirious state was, I'm not ready for you yet. So here is everybody around me is saying this is the end, including my wife, who updated her Facebook and Match.com profile. She's going to kill me for this. I love you, honey. By the way, everybody says, I don't want to bother you, Rick. I know you're busy. I'm going to talk to your wife about getting together with you. I'm like, are you kidding me? My kids are now 10, 12, 14, and 16. She's got a household to worry about. It's total insanity, but you're going to go through her. Okay, good luck with that. So I want to set the stage. Think about questions you want to ask. I think a Q&A. This is a breakfast meeting. I could have had a slide presentation and done all that, but I would suggest on the way here, Jessica said, why don't you give the same talk you gave to Stagen? And I said, no, because what happened since Stagen, which was 8 weeks ago, is far more important. What happened since Stagen is I stared at death and somehow got through it. And I want to talk about divinity because that, in my view, when I say divinity, what I mean is, look, all of us are made up of something like 6 or 7 trillion cells. And those cells every second are interacting with each other. So there's trillions of things happening in our body magically, almost like a business transaction, 1 trillion times a second. It's that bizarre. And if you don't believe in divine intervention helping us along the way, then, I mean, at least for me, that was my wake-up call. And I'll tell you how it expressed itself. So right after the Stagen speech, like I said, I went to bed. I was really sick. I didn't know I had sepsis. I didn't know I was at end stage, as Scott just pointed out. And I'm laying in bed, semi-conscious one day. I had 104 temperature. And my wife is on speakerphone with her sister, who's an ICU nurse. And I hear these words. And I don't know if she was on speakerphone or she was in the bed next to me. I just don't know what happened. I hear these words. If you don't get him a drip antibiotic in 1 hour, your husband will be dead. That's what I heard. So my wife freaks out. She gets me in the car, and we're heading to the emergency room. Well, I know from experience now, having 3 separate visits to an emergency room in the prior 3 months, that the wait is 15 hours. Well, 15 hours is a lot longer than 1 hour. So just, again, thinking about divine intervention. So we're in the car, and I said, honey, go to an urgent care. And she's like, we have to go to the emergency room. I go, just go to an urgent care. And it's so weird how this happened. I didn't think of that. I feel this tap on my shoulder. That was what I imagined. Why would I even think of going to an urgent care? So we pull into this urgent care. I don't know if you've ever seen someone with sepsis, but you can't really breathe or talk. I was literally walking like this. And somehow it shuts down your system. You can go online and see videos of it. You have no control over your body. And to the point where when I was talking, my wife's like, move your damn mouth. I'm like, I can't. So that's how bad it was. So I get to the front desk of the urgent care and I said these words. I think maybe my wife said it. If we don't get antibiotics in him right now, he's a dead man. And again, thinking about divine intervention, there's a guy standing behind me and he says, I'm the owner of the clinic. We're going to do exactly what he says. Because the person behind the front desk is, we don't know your history, HIPAA, this, that. They literally push me in the back. Next thing you know, I've got the most powerful drip IV antibiotics that they had at the urgent care. And I sit there for 3 hours. And this is really cool. This owner of the clinic was an entrepreneurial doctor, calls the emergency room and says, we're sending you a patient, and this is what you're going to do when he walks in. You're going to do this, 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 and this. And I'm listening to this going, holy shit, this is like unbelievable. Because if we went to the emergency room, who knows what would have happened. So as a result of that, we then get to the emergency room. Now I'm not fine, but I'm better. I'm more confident. I'm starting to move my lips and stuff. And I don't know medically what's going on. Honestly, I didn't even know what sepsis was. Never even heard the word, I don't think, in my entire life until then. So now as I sit here, the only thing I'm dealing with is I've got this metal stent holding my liver biliary tube open to allow my liver to empty, because on the outside of that tube is a tumor shutting it. So it's called the biliary tube stent, and it just sucks. It's when you move around, because in order to hold it in place, it's got these little metal things in it that are digging in. So that's what I'm dealing with, and the cancer. I think it might be best now, I'm looking at the clock, to just open it up to questions, because I think that's would be the more powerful thing. So, yeah, use the mic. Does anybody have a question? Jessica? Or you can pass the mic around, can't you?
Hey, Randy. Rick, thanks so much for being here for all of us. In your talk with Stegan, you talked about the entrepreneurial side of how you put your business in order really quickly, and even vendors just the generosity that is the outpouring. Yeah. I just want you to hit on that a little bit, because as entrepreneurs in the room, in the back of the head thinking is like, what I got to take care of I got to survive. I got to live. What do I do about the business? And I think that perspective would be helpful. And I also want to say the other thing I said is, I told someone the other day, they said, how's Rick doing? I said, of everybody I know, Rick's living more than anyone else. You're really living during this time. So
thank you.
Thank you for modeling that.
All right. Let's just go back to that speech. I decided I'm not, I'm not a speaker. I just get up and say what's on my mind. If you want to watch the background of all this, just go to YouTube and put in Stegan space Sapio. You'll see that video of all the 92 different protocols that I've done. But the thing that really has hit me the most during this whole ordeal, and my wife, is the immense generosity of people. And the one story I like to tell, I'll say his name now. His name's Greg Alexander. He started Collective 54. He's a vendor of our company, and he referred a deal to us. And it closed on my birthday, October 26, 1963, my 60th birthday. By the way, at 60, I feel really good right now. It's really crazy. So I call him up. I go, Greg, I owe you $170,000. Thank you for referring that deal to us. And he said, it was like a long silence. And he said, friends don't take money from friends with pancreatic cancer. And I'm like, holy shit, that's $170,000. And the truth is, people that I've met that are fighting cancer alternatively, it's millions of dollars. Nothing's covered by insurance. It's all out of pocket. And so that was unbelievably generous. And the other generosity story is the guy who came to my house right around the same time when, as I said, my health was just declining from August. And that's RP that used to own RP Valet. And he says, who's taking it? We decided to do treatment, experimental treatment in Vienna, Austria. And he said, who's taking you to Vienna? And I said, I'm going to go by myself. And he's like, dude, you can't even move. What do you mean you're going to go by yourself? And because I said to my wife, I don't want you to leave the kids and have the kids worried. She's done a phenomenal job of insulating the kids from all this, which is incredible. And this guy with 4 kids decided to drop everything, take me to Vienna. He wouldn't even let me pay for the plane tickets or the hotel. Got a chauffeur, a cook, a shopper. At night when I was sleeping, because he's like, you would snore and then stop. We didn't know at the time that I had this infection. I'd wake up in a pool of sweat every night. He would be sitting by the bed watching me, and I'd wake up. What the hell are you doing, dude? So my wife said, "You just one thing, don't come back married to RP." I said, he's taking better care of me than you. He had my laundry folded in the morning. Unbelievable. Am I answering what you asked? Yeah. Just, can you...
Rick, how's it going? Good to see you, man.
Good to see you.
So I joined EO 5 years ago, and my first event that I ever went to was the Tenured Speakers event. And that was the first time I heard Rick talk. and I was blown away. I was like, who the hell is this guy? But Rick, over the years, we had a chance to get to know each other, so I'm really thankful for that. At that event, you talked about raising independent children. You talked about something that you touched on today. Are you a consumer or a creator? And a creator is making things happen. And today you're talking about taking agency in a crisis. So I hear a lot about just being independent, a theme of self-reliance. Where did that come from? Did that start early on in your life?
Yeah.
Is that something that you built on? I'm curious.
So it's really interesting. When I was 11, my dad came home and announced, I was one of 9 kids, but announced to the family that he had stage 4 incurable cancer. And so I'm 11, and my mother was very unstable mentally because my 4-year-old brother had died not too long before that. So a 4-year-old in your home, especially a 4-year-old, this kid was a bright-eyed, I was young. He died from cancer on the other side of chemotherapy. So my mother was unstable. Well, then when we get the news that my dad's dying, she really went over the edge. So when my dad died, I was 13, and my mother never recovered. She had a nervous breakdown. So I never really had a relationship or a conversation with my mother. So when you lose both parents and you live close to New York City in 1977, you got 2 roads to choose, dependence or independence, So all the kids became independent to the point where we have over, I think, 300 years of marriage now between all the kids and no divorces. With that upbringing, it's pretty crazy. So I hope I answered the question. All right, so I want to share something with you guys. So I go back to Vienna. I got back last Sunday to do the experimental treatment the second time. It was a 2-week thing. So I went 1 week, and then he said, come back in a few months. Well, when I was in Vienna, they didn't know that I had a sepsis infection either. No one knew, which we all should have known now that I know what it's about. So I show up in Vienna with RP again. And I walk into the clinic, and the head doctor looks at me. He goes, I never thought I'd see you again. And I'm like, I took that as a positive, like, holy cow, that's great. He goes, no, when you left, you were so sick. And I'm like, why didn't anybody tell me that? And he says, because we don't like to tell you the bad news. Some Western doctors like to do that. We don't like to do that. We wanted to give you hope. Had he told me how sick I really was, I don't know. So it's interesting how these divine moments play out. But he said something really interesting. He said, you, Mr. Sapio, he speaks in a really heavy accent, are on God's time now. I'm like, what's God's time? And he says, you should have been gone 2 months ago. You're here. So you need to build a relationship with God. And so that is the takeaway from the Stegen event till now. There's been so many divinely orchestrated things. And so what does that mean for me personally? It means, and here, what can you learn from this? It means understanding why you're here. And if you don't know why you're here, figure it out. Spend time thinking about it, meditating, and live a life in alignment with that purpose. And I think my purpose is evolving, but it's always been a version of inspiring entrepreneurship in others. And what does that mean? It means waking people up to their true potential. And so I think for the rest of my life, I don't want to be a speaker, but I'll give talks like this occasionally. And the objective would be to wake people up to their potential. And their potential isn't manifested by staring at screens. It just makes me sad to think average child in America is staring at screens 10 hours a day. 10 hours. I don't even know how the hell that could be true, but that's what you read. And so for us personally, we've just decided to not get our kids cell phones and or any screens really. We have connected computers at home. And so my 16-year-old is a sophomore in high school. How does that manifest? Well, in 8th grade, he's like, I'm the only kid in my class that doesn't have a cell phone. I want to go to boarding school. And there's a boarding school in Kansas where there's no screens. So that's where he's going. And there's a lot of schools like that now. So interesting, they asked me to give a talk a year ago. I go up to the school with a presentation on a computer, and the headmaster goes, we don't have a screen for you to share your presentation. I'm like, well, that's bullshit. All right. Uh, Let me see. There was something else I want to share. Here's something really cool. Speaking about taking responsibility for outcomes and divine intervention. Has anybody seen that Maozuro Emoto water experiment? Okay. So basically, this Japanese scientist took water, just regular water. My kids tease me how I say water. And on the outside of a glass, put hate, as an example, hate, the word hate, and using an electron microscope, looked at how the water crystallized. And the water would crystallize into really nasty, ugly shapes. And on another glass of water, he put the word love. Just by writing the word love on the outside of the glass, the water crystals would change to a shape that was beautiful. And you have to look this up. You can see the videos online, and all different kinds of words. You could put Hitler versus Jesus. You could put whatever you want. And so as a result of that, as an engineer, I got an engineering degree, I'm like, holy, that's pretty cool. So my wife would write words all over my back for months: love, surrender, joy. When I got diagnosed, because we're 80 or 90%, whatever are we 80% water molecules? I don't even know. But it made a massive difference. And if you're looking at, with your own eyes, these experiments, I don't know if I invented a new medical technique or not, but the point is I would do anything, and that just made sense. But really funny, I got a blood test about 2 months ago, and the doctor's like, there's something that you're doing that your body's massively allergic to. Turns out I'm allergic to Sharpies. So it's always good news, bad news. The last prepared thing I had to say was Michael J. Fox had a terminal illness 40 years ago. Terminal. And he has a quote that's gone viral that says, when you get a terminal illness, you have a responsibility to learn more about your illness than the medical professional serving you. And whoever sent that to me, like a week right after I got diagnosed, I'm forever thankful to, because it made me question everything. And I've heard from, by the way, the medical industry, I don't know what you want to call it, saved my life, so I'm forever grateful. But they don't like to be questioned. And I've had so many doctors point at me and say, we don't like patients like you. I'm like, well, I'm 2 months past my expiration that you told me. Is that pissing you off? It's so funny to see their face when they say you're not going to live 2 months and you walk in 2 months after your expiration. It's really interesting. It's an interesting dialogue. All right. Any other questions? Yes.
All right. If you guys haven't watched the video, somebody have to watch it. There's something that you're willing, anything it takes.
You're not done here. God's not done with you. And you said you went to witch doctors and you had exorcisms and you went to everybody, a priest, a bishop, everybody. But you mentioned something about, I don't know if you're able to talk about it if you have time, if you even want to, but you said something about one of the exorcisms was really interesting, but you didn't talk about it. And I've been laying awake every night wondering what it looked like.
So I met with this priest who said, when you're harboring a lot of, I don't know if I want to go here, holy cow, a lot of pain, suffering, and unforgiveness of your mom. I was really pissed off my whole life that my mom wasn't there. And not only was she not there, but there was a degree of, I can't believe I'm saying this. When my brother died, I was a baby. And imagine this guy as a 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-year-old. And my mother would get so mad at me all the time. And she would say things like, why did God take Frankie and not you? So I had this like, well, I'm going to prove to you while I'm here as a 6, 7, 8-year-old. So there was that. And I had to let all of that go. And so happens that, where does bitterness and non-forgiveness sit? You're shaking your head here. Where does it sit? Based on research, it sits in your pancreas. I don't know, but I was told that, and I found some videos about that online. So I did a lot of, so when they did this exorcism, it was really the pancreas letting go of this bitterness and non-forgiveness. That's the word I'm using. So there's a lot of weird things going on. I believe that our conscious mind creates our experience of life. So it all has to start here. So I had to say to myself, if I've got a diagnosis of pancreatic cancer, I had to create it somehow, consciously. And if I created it consciously, guess what? I could get rid of it consciously. Now, the story's not over yet, but I believe in my heart of hearts as I talk to you that we're over the hump. Who knows? As my brother came down for the roast last week, and he sits across the table from me. He's 11 years older than me. He goes, "You got 2 years." I go, "Where the hell is that coming from?" He goes, "Alex Trebek, 2 years. Patrick Swayze, 2 years." And he named 7 actors that I have no idea who they are. I go, "How the hell do you know this shit?" 2 years. So, the story's not over. But I think, I have to say, and I said this to Jessica on the way here, I talked to her on the phone, I have not met one person, nor has anybody introduced me to a single person who got the diagnosis of pancreatic cancer and did not do chemotherapy. So I'm sure they're out there, but they put so much pressure with this particular cancer. It's the worst one. It's the most aggressive. It's near all the organs. It's surrounded by veins. So the story is yet to be finished. I don't know. You got a question?
A question is, I remember you talking, and you mentioned a story about young children.
You mentioned a story about young children, and that the teacher in the class said, "I want you to draw your vision of cancer."
Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
So one person I've been working with, actually 2 people, Barbara Schneider, and it's barbaraschneider.com. She runs a healing ministry is what I'll call it. And since I'm going to call it the second half, post-sepsis, there was pre-sepsis and post-sepsis. Post-sepsis, my life is God's time. And Barbara Schneider at barbaraschneider.com works with a guy named Brian Cooper, and I've been spending a lot of time talking to them about it, about what I'm about to say. And that is, there was a study done, a psychotherapist, I don't know how many hundreds of kids were involved, but in this one particular study, they went to a cancer ward in New York City. I think it was Sloan Kettering. Don't quote me on that. It was 48 patients, kids, that were terminal. They were all going to die. And the therapist got up in front of the room and said, everybody has a piece of paper and some crayons, draw a picture of your cancer. And 46 out of 48 of the kids drew a monster. And 2 of the kids drew a picture of a friend, like something happy, like a puppy. I forget. The images were there, though, in the article I read. And the only 2 that survived the terminal illness were the people that drew a picture of a friend. And with Barbara and Brian Cooper, they're like, it's not only a friend, it's a teacher. And so I'm embracing my cancer now as a teacher. It's teaching me how to be more loving. It's teaching me how to be more present. It's teaching me how to be more honest. I don't think I could have given this talk prior to meeting them.
Real quick, we got, for those of you who don't know, we've had a live stream going for this to EOers all over the world. I think the Philippines is the furthest away I've seen so far, but they've been super active in the chat, and one of them had a question, and I'm going to apologize if he's still listening. He did not give his last name, but I won't forget his first name because it's John without an H. That's an easy one for me. And he says, I find it difficult to embrace the love of life, i.e. focus on the most important things, when running the business and in the daily grind. Do you have any advice on how we can have your same appreciation without facing a medical diagnosis? Thank you so much. This talk's been fantastic.
That's why I brought up the 9/11 thing. Is it, for whatever reason, human beings find love in crisis, and I don't know how to recreate that. That's why I brought it up. And you guys could listen to the story 100 times, but until you get a terminal cancer diagnosis, I promise you're not going to do a lot of the stuff that we talk about. So I'm sorry, I don't have an answer to that. But there is something that I would say. Get your businesses in order so that if something happened to you, you've got a CEO to hand the keys to. This is really funny, but one of the my wife and I do Monday night date night. We didn't miss a Monday night date night for 20 years. And the reason we picked Monday night is because restaurants are empty. You could hear each other, so we could fight alone every Monday. But one thing she always said, my biggest fear is not dying, not you getting hit by a bus, none of that. My biggest fear is that you get a terminal illness and I got to take care of you. And then it happened. It's pretty crazy. So I wonder if there was some manifestation there, because I haven't worked in since August 18th. And the business is fine. It's not great, but it's fine. And and the reason is I had just picked a good president about 2 years ago to run things. So that's good. And yeah.
You've mentioned a smorgasbord of treatment. What one or two or three protocols would you do again if you're starting over and know now what you know?
So outside of the spiritual side, I've spent a lot of time in prayer and meditation. I believe in my heart of hearts, with an engineer's mind and an entrepreneur's mind and a taking responsibility for outcomes mindset. And I don't know where you're gonna have to do this for yourself, but I believe now that cancer does not like oxygen. I've done a lot of oxygen therapy. So a hyperbaric chamber, breathing oxygen while exercising, which is called EWAT, exercise with oxygen therapy. Cancer does not like electricity. So there's things like EMF pulse machines, there's things like multi-wave oscillators, there's things like you sit on an electric coil. I've done all of that. And I've also learned, and by the way, this is my truth, people could dispute it, that's fine. Cancer does not like heat. I've done a lot of heat therapy, hypothermia. And in Germany, that's supposedly with some cancers the first line of defense, where they heat your body up. So people, your immune system, which is kind of ironic, you get a virus, what happens? You get a fever. Well, we're taught to take pills to lower the fever. No, you want the fever because it's going to kill bacteria, cancer, and what's the third thing? Viruses. So I have intentionally heated up my body probably 50 times to high temperatures. So I don't know if all of that's working, but in the combination of being spiritually aligned, going after the cancer by changing the terrain, and separately doing all of the protocols, I guess something's working. I don't know. It's just really, at this point, everybody's mystified. But the story's not over. We don't know how it's going to play out. And I think how it ultimately plays out is it starts with consciousness, right? And everything that happens in our life, I believe, everything, even accidents, we consciously say it and then it happens. Am I being clear? I'm not asking you to believe me. That's my belief. And so somehow, some way, I manifested this, and somehow, some way, I'm going to unmanifest this. Okay.
Rick, hey, I want to talk about kind of when you got the diagnosis. I don't know if anyone else in here is thinking about this, but like, what goes through your head when you hear those words, right? And you talk about taking agency, but I'm guessing there was a time between hearing those words and taking agency of it. What was that like? Because I can't imagine hearing those words, right? So I'd be interested to see what that time was like between when you heard the diagnosis and when you took agency of it.
I love that question because you're right. There was about 2 days where I was completely mentally hijacked. I was in complete terror. It's over. There's no hope. You're done. And I had this moment. I don't know what happened, but I just woke up one day. I just woke up. It was a Friday morning. It was August 18th. I just woke up and I said, I'm getting the hell out of here. And the pressure I got, Rand said it, like, what do you mean? You got this diagnosis. This is what you do. And I'm like, no. And so what happened in that moment, I took agency. I said, no, I don't want this. And this is a funny story. The first thing I did was I went to the office to talk to the staff, and then I went home. It was a Friday night. It was about 6 p.m. and I'll never forget this as long as I live. This is my memory of it. My wife has a different memory of it. But everybody, you think about it, you get the diagnosis. So my wife goes home, tells her friends. So then there's a house full of people. And I walk into the house at 6 p.m. and everybody's drinking wine. There's food all over the place. And they look at me like, what the hell is he doing here? And I'm like, I'm not dead. But they had already conjured up, like, we have these images. You get a diagnosis like this, like he's in the hospital, he's hooked up to wires, he's tubes and all that, which was true. And then I'm home. And I never went back. So I guess to answer your question directly, there was a wake-up point where I said, wait a minute, I have agency. And I can't tell you the number of people, including, I'll just say her name is Barbara. Last night at 9 o'clock, I get this emergency call from a friend who said, you got to talk to this girl, Barbara, who's got pancreatic cancer. And she's like, I watched your video. She gets on the phone, and I go, well, what's going on? And she told me the horrific news that she's like, I can't take agency. I have to listen to my doctors. And it was just one massive problem after another. And I said, well, if you're going to listen to the doctors, talk to this doctor and do this. And I just got the feeling talking to her that she didn't have the ability to have agency. So I think that we all have to get, is that word translating agency? Meaning I'm my own agent. And if you don't have the ability, I don't know what to say. Yeah.
Hey, Rick. So, we've talked a lot on the business side and some of the things you do there, but, the business takes care of itself. But for me, I think about, if that happened to me, what would be my first thought is, how am I going to talk to my kids about this? So could you talk to us a little bit about how you've talked to your kids about it and how you and your wife have handled it?
The most incredible thing I've learned from this is that I married the right woman. She has been an absolute rock. It's been incredible. And she's been insulating the kids from all of it, complete insulation. But I did talk to my 16-year-old, and I said, what do you think about this? And he goes, I don't think about it. I go, what do you mean you don't think about it? You selfish bastard. He said, you're the strongest person I know, and you'll figure it out. Just like that. So that gave me confidence. But my 13-year-old, at the time when we announced it to the dinner table, I shared this story a couple of times with people. So I'm bawling my eyes out. My wife's crying. At the point we said it was the end of August, and it was the exact same conversation my dad had with me 45 years earlier. And my 13-year-old says, Dad, it's not so bad. I go, why isn't it so bad? He goes, you get to meet God. And I'm like, A, I'm not ready to meet God. And B, I didn't meet your mom until I was 40. I was no saint. So I don't know if I'll ever meet God. So anyway, to answer the question directly, they're living their life, and we don't want to burden them. Unfortunately, the way my parents handled it was the exact opposite. It was like every day they were arguing about, should we do chemo, should we not do chemo, all that stuff. So I appreciate everybody chiming in and getting up early in the morning to hear this. And the truth is, thank you for this location, because I actually have a doctor's appointment at 9:30 nearby. So I'm going to scoot out of here. I really love EO. EO has been an incredible addition to my life. I've been involved for 29 years. I'll never forget in 1989 when Birthing of Giants was first announced, my brother applied. And he goes, I met this really cool guy named Vern Harnish. Here's his cell phone number. Here's his number. It probably wasn't a cell phone number. So I called Vern up. We became friends. And then when EO came to Dallas, I think it was like 1992, they were thinking about Dallas. Vern called me and said, you need to get involved in EO Dallas. And the guy who started it was a guy named Millage Hart in Dallas. But I was one of the early members with Rand Stegan. And Millage said to me years later, all my friends, all my good friends are part of YEO is what they called it at the time. And I'm like, that's impossible to believe. But I got to tell you, 30 years later, like all the people that have had a massive influence on my life came from either EO directly or as a relationship to EO, like Jay as an example, who I met at an EO event years ago. So thank you guys for being you. Thank you guys for taking agency in your life. Thank you for taking responsibility for outcomes. And thank you for giving me the floor today. I appreciate it.